Hello and welcome to another episode of the djproject Criterion Collection. And here we're going to talk about Spine 288, T for Truth, directed by Orson Welles, 1974. The following film covers events, situations, and people, all of which are true. And by true, I mean false. They're all lies, but they're entertaining lies. And in the end, isn't that the real truth? The answer is no. Okay. All right. The film, in all seriousness, the film itself is basically it's a very free-form visual essay that looks at the nature of deception, lies, and trickery, and its main subject of interest is Elmire Dehoré, the world-famous art forger that could pretty much reproduce any major important artists within some reason of the early 20th century, and played art dealers in museums for fools with his forgeries. And what makes it even a little bit more interesting is that he is interviewed, and he befriends Clifford Irving, who ended up writing a biography on Elmire Dehoré called Fake. And then he would later gain notoriety by claiming to write the autobiography of Howard Hughes, which it turned out to be a fake. So already this gets a little bit interesting. You have a look at a man who's known to make fakes, interviewed by a guy who would make a more or less truthful account of a faker, who then would later make a fake autobiography of a real man. And it's the kind of thing where Wells just had a lot of fun with it, had a lot of fun with that idea. And he himself knew something of magic, and so this was another element that gets incorporated into it. This is a In looking at the film, it's the most Godardian film that you could get from a non-Godard, and I believe Godard was a fan of Citizen Kane also, so that's a nice little full circle. And it's not just in. I mean, well, the obvious one is in the editing. It's a lot of quick juxtapositions and lots of footage and different ideas that just sort of move at a fairly breakneck pace, and it's almost, the first time viewing it, you will probably get both overwhelmed and bored at the same time, just trying to keep track of everything. But it is one of those films where you have to kind of see it again to get, and especially when you know how the whole thing plays out, it's even more interesting to see it a second time to have all the pieces fit together. But what makes this particularly Godardian is not just its experimentation, but it best encapsulates I think I should outright say that I'm going to call this Godard's two postulates of cinema, because he's attributed for saying two things that, when you take them together, it really does define the nature of cinema. He was famous for saying that cinema is the truth photographed 24 times a second, and he also said that every edit is a lie. And you can't really top that, as if you want a very succinct description about the essence, the nature of cinema, and what it conveys. You really can't top those two single statements, and they work they work very well together. And while yes, it creates a paradox, but it's a very interesting paradox, and especially for that subject matter of with deception, because the claim that is made, and I think it could be, you could kind of take him at his word. He says for the next hour, everything in this film is true. And in a certain sense, he's right. And if you look at each individual shots, yes, those shots were made. In fact, it used footage that Francois Reichenbach, a French film director, made because he wanted to do something about Omer de Jorre, and he had shot some footage, and then somehow Welles found out about this and then really liked the idea, and Reichenbach said, you know, if you want to use this, go ahead. So I think that he had intended to make something, but then he didn't really know what to do with it, and so then Welles took it and then took it even further, and then as he was putting it together, the Clifford Irving Howard Hughes scandal broke out, and so that made it even more interesting. So then more was added onto it, and the end result was F for fake. So yeah, each component, if you take its individual components, yes, they all stem from something truthful, but it's in the construction that calls everything into question, which fits very well with the larger theme about deception, trickery. There's also authorship, and even the nature of art, because it was Picasso, at least attributed to Picasso, that art is essentially a lie that leads you to the truth, or words to that effect. And in that sense, it's a very satisfying film thematically. It's if you're somebody that likes to watch films to get ideas or to think about, serve as a springboard to think about themes and ideas, this is definitely up your alley. If not, you're probably going to lose patience with it. I'm just going to be very frank, but I find it particularly satisfying and even very, very amusing the way shots are put together. And of course Welles provides some both on-camera and off-camera narration and commentary on this, and there's never really a dull moment. It's very, very playful and mischievous, and you pretty much have to go along with it, because if you try to work against it, you're just going to end up frustrating yourself. But if you just go along with it, and stay with it, it's quite rewarding. I'd also say that this should repudiate any notion that Orson Welles can only be known for Citizen Kane, or that the only good thing he ever did was Citizen Kane, and then pretty much after that you can just forget. I think that's no longer the case now. I think over the years his reputation post-Citizen Kane has gotten better, and he's recognized as an important cinematic figure beyond just Citizen Kane. Yes, I know about the famous, which may be true, may be false. See, there you go. What is true, what is false? Anyways, but the famous anecdote involving Billy Rose, where after he had saw Citizen Kane, he told Orson, "Quit, kid, you'll never top it. Quit while you're ahead." But after that, he was able. I mean, yes, there's the Magnificent Ambersons, which is kind of a mixed bag, because on the one hand, it's even in its known form, it still was quite inspiring. But then when you learn about what was going to be originally there, and if it weren't for executive meddling, excuse me, it could have been a better work than what it ended up being. But then there's some other works that benefited from some other attempts at reconstruction, like Mr. Arkadin and Touch of Evil. And then there are some other films that they didn't have to involve executive meddling, and but were not these big elaborate Hollywood productions. You got The Lady from Shanghai, you got Chimes at Midnight, you have The Trial, and so Welles kept going, and he kept doing pretty much whatever he wanted. But the thing is that he didn't have the same kind of resources he had with Citizen Kane. Although I should point out that even Citizen Kane had its limitations. It wasn't as if he was given an unlimited budget. He actually had to scale some things back. But of course, what makes it really interesting is what he was able to do with some of the limitations that he was able to work with. So it was imagination unbounded, and he just kept that going. It's just, yes, it was more difficult to gather the resources. And actually, another thing that maybe I think it's easy to tie this film with his filmography because he himself directed it, but it also makes me think, as far as just I started to think about connecting it with The Third Man. Even though he didn't direct it, he was definitely in it, but he certainly played a character where it was all about deception and lies and trickery, and so it's kind of a in that sense it's kind of a creative. I don't want to call it a creative sequel, but certainly a creative companion to The Third Man. And yeah, and Joseph Cotten is in it too. So, but I would say that if you want to know Orson Welles beyond just Citizen Kane, if you want to see something that is a bit offbeat, and even though it was made in even though it was released in 1974, it still feels a bit offbeat. There's still some freshness to it. Again, like I said, some of the danger of seeing older films that are influential or known for have certain trademarks is that sometimes going back to the earlier films may seem a bit quaint because you've seen attributes of it in other films. But this is one where there's still a bit of a freshness and vitality, and I think it's because you still, even if you've seen it before and you know what to expect, it can still surprise you in some other ways. And so I would say buy the ticket and take the ride with this one. So yeah, F for fake. And until next time, take care.